You should not blindly trust people because it can end badly. My wife turned out to be a real cheater, whom I blindly believed, and for whom I was ready to do anything. She paid very dearly for this. The complication came into my life on October 15, 2010 at 7:30 in the morning. I was at Wilcox Field, waiting to board my flight to Nassau, when two men in ill-fitting suits approached me. They stopped in front of me, and I glanced up from my iPad to see two expressionless faces. "Mr. Kavanaugh, could you please come with us?" one of them said. Polite guys, they even said please. "Who are you, and what do you want?" I asked. "I'm Special Agent Washington, and this is Special Agent Brown. We're with the FBI," the other man responded. "May I see some identification?" I requested. They showed me their laminated badges, and the photos matched their faces. Since I had no idea what a genuine FBI badge looked like, I took their word for it. "I'm afraid we're here to arrest you," Washington said. "You're being charged with insider trading by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Would you come with us, please?" I stood up, followed them down a corridor, and through a door into a room with a table and 4 chairs. They informed me of my rights and pulled out a pair of handcuffs. Really? I thought. They're going to parade me through the airport in handcuffs for insider trading. As it turned out, that was only partially true. They allowed me to carry my jacket, covering the cuffs from curious onlookers. They took my iPad, escorted me to their headquarters in Miramar, and placed me in another room, this time with only 3 chairs. After 30 minutes, Agents Washington and Brown entered the room and took their seats. They read me a list of charges. According to them, I was involved in a hacking operation aimed at obtaining corporate press releases before they were made public. They claimed my group had made over $100 million through these activities. They wanted to ask me some questions. "I'm sorry, agents," I said, "but I plan to remain silent and I would like to speak to an attorney." They tried to persuade me that it would be in my best interest to cooperate, but I held my ground. These agents were not on my side, and I had no intention of answering any of their questions. They took me to a desk and let me use the phone. Since I didn't know any lawyers, I asked for a phone book. They brought one, and I scanned through the impressive listings, though I had no idea who to choose. I randomly selected an ad that seemed appealing. A man answered, and I explained that I needed legal representation. He asked what kind of case it was, and after I told him, he transferred my call. A woman answered, introducing herself as Tyler Atkins. "How can I assist you, Mr. Kavanaugh?" she asked. I went over the situation again, and she advised me to say nothing and that she would be there in an hour. They returned me to my room, where I waited. 50 minutes later, the door opened, and in walked one of the most striking women I had ever seen. She had to be nearly 6 feet tall, with fiery red hair, a model-like face, and that flawless creamy complexion redheads often have. Her ice-blue eyes were piercing, and her legs seemed endless in that skirt. She was absolutely stunning. She introduced herself and shook my hand. Her fingers were long, slender, and cool, with a firm grip. I guessed her age to be around 40, though I later found out I was off by 7 years. She sat down, reviewed the charges, and looked up at me. "You're in a lot of trouble, Mr. Kavanaugh," she said. "Did you do it?" "Does that really matter?" I asked. "For the purpose of my representation, no. Personally, yes, it matters quite a lot," she replied. "Well, I didn't do it," I told her. "I've never hacked a computer, have no idea how, wasn't part of any scheme, and have never received a press release ahead of its public release. Even if I had, I wouldn't have engaged in insider trading. I'm completely innocent of these charges." She looked at me skeptically, and her gaze seemed to pierce right through me. "All right," she said. "We'll proceed based on those statements, but if I find out later that you're lying to me, things are going to get messy, got it?" "Perfectly," I replied. Let's see about getting you out of here. Is there anyone you need to contact?" "My wife," I answered. "I'd like to speak to my children too, but that can wait until I'm out." "I'll see what I can do," she said before leaving. I didn't see anyone for the next 3 hours. Just as I was on the verge of a bathroom emergency, Agent Brown walked in with Ms. Atkins. "I've arranged bail," she said. "You'll have to surrender your passport, and just so you're aware, all your bank accounts are frozen. How are you set for money?" "Will my credit cards work?" I asked. She raised an eyebrow at Brown, who cleared his throat. "They're frozen too," he said. "You won't be able to use them." "Will I get my wallet back?" I asked. "Yes, you'll get all your personal belongings back," she replied, "except for your iPad. That's now evidence." "I'm fine on money then, and ready to go." "Well, as soon as Agent Brown shows me to a restroom, I'll be good to go," I said. They handed me an envelope with my belongings, and I left with her. "Come see me at 10 in the morning," she said, giving me a business card. She also called us both cabs. "Would you like to use my phone to call your wife?" she asked. I called home, but the answering machine picked up. I left a brief message, saying that my trip had been canceled, I would be home in an hour, and then I returned her phone. The cabs arrived and I headed home. When I got there, the house was empty, so I made myself something to eat. It was hard to focus, but I managed. I needed to call the kids, figure out where Kelly was, and sort some things out. Neither Daniel nor Patricia were home, so I left messages for them to call me back. After eating, I called my boss, John Sinclair. He informed me that I had been fired, my personal items had been packed and sent to my home, and I had lost my trader's license. He was pretty sure I'd never work in the industry again, and even seemed eager for me to face a lengthy prison sentence. Well, that was bad. I was now unemployed and facing criminal charges. Kelly didn't come home that night, and when I called her, it went straight to voicemail. I didn't know if she had heard the news or what she had heard, but it seemed clear she was abandoning me. Fantastic. Now I wondered about the kids. What had they been told? If Kelly knew, I was sure she had spoken to them. The next morning, I kept my appointment with Ms. Atkins. She told me there was a lot of paperwork to dig through, and this wouldn't be resolved quickly. "Mr. Kavanaugh, how are you planning to pay me for your defense?" she asked. "If I'm acquitted, payment won't be an issue," I replied. "So maybe it's in your best interest to make sure that happens." She laughed, and I realized I liked hearing her laugh. I made a mental note to try to make her laugh more often. "We've got a long day ahead of us," she said. "Let's get started. What do you think happened, and how are you going to help me prove your innocence?" I asked for a list of the people involved. She explained they hadn't done discovery yet, so she didn't have any details. That information would come once she met with the FBI and the SEC. "Honestly, I have no idea until I get a clearer understanding of what's going on," I said. "Once I do, we'll get to work." We went over a few more details and I signed a mountain of paperwork. By the time we ran out of ink and blank spaces for my signature, I headed home. There were about a dozen messages on my answering machine, and surprisingly, they were from Kelly and the kids. They were in some trouble, stranded in Belmopan. Her credit cards weren't working, which wasn't exactly shocking. She had a little cash, but it wouldn't last long. She needed my help. Oddly, the kids were with her, and their messages were the same, but no one explained why they were in Belize. It was all getting really strange. I had barely walked through the door when the phone rang. It was Kelly. "Hey, Selden," she sounded stressed. "Look, I don't have much time. We're stuck at the airport, and I need to be able to use my credit cards. Can you call the bank and see what's going on?" "I'm afraid that won't help," I replied. "Kelly, I've been arrested and charged with insider trading. The cards you have won't work." "Is there any way you could get some money to me?" she asked. "How much do you need?" I asked. "Just enough for tickets home," she said. "I'll see what I can do," I told her, "but all our accounts are frozen." "All right, honey," she said. "Please hurry, and thanks for helping us." That was, without a doubt, the strangest conversation I'd ever had. Still no explanation for why she and the kids were in Belize, no reaction to me being arrested. Nothing. She should have been shocked by every word I said, but she wasn't. Maybe it was just the time crunch she'd mentioned. I figured I'd get all the answers when she got back. A while ago, I had rented a storage unit. I went there and unlocked the safe inside the cedar chest my mother had left me. I took out enough cash to keep me going until I figured things would settle down. I wired airfare to Kelly and the kids, then poured myself a scotch to calm my nerves. I sat there thinking until it was time for bed, though I lay awake for a while, my mind racing. The next morning my phone woke me up. It was someone from Ms. Atkins's office. They informed me that discovery had taken place and all the case information was now available. A computer expert was coming to go over the details with us, and I was expected at 10. I showered, pulled myself together, and took a cab to her office. The computer expert turned out to be an attractive young woman named Lainey. The trail had gone quite cold, and while I'm no tech expert myself, I do know my way around a computer. Between the two of us, we were able to uncover enough to show that most of the transactions had been made through my home computer, which I only used for personal matters. Things were looking bad until we started analyzing the dates and times. That's when things began to turn around. It turned out that many of the transactions happened when I wasn't even home. On several of the dates, I was out of the country. I could see Ms. Atkins starting to believe me. "Mr. Kavanaugh, who knows your passwords?" she asked. "Kelly knows the password to my home computer," I said. "The IT staff at work would know my business passwords, along with my supervisors. But none of them would have access to my home password." "Would Kelly know your business passwords?" she inquired. I shook my head. "No, I don't share those with anyone, not even her." It became clear that someone, likely with Kelly's help, was trying to set me up. But why? How could Kelly have gotten the information? The files in question were press releases, filled with information that would be highly valuable to investors. Interestingly, the file dates on my home computer were typically a week before the official release dates, meaning whoever accessed my computer had early access to information they could use for trading ahead of the public release. A lot of those press releases passed through the hands of my boss, John Sinclair, but any trades he made would be scrutinized. If he acted on the information before it went public, he'd be charged with insider trading. So it became clear he was feeding the information to Kelly so she could make the trades without raising any red flags. But why use my computer? Then it hit me. It was to frame me. John must have used my work computer when I wasn't at my desk, and when those files showed up during routine audits, they led to a search of my home computer, completing the setup against me. I met Kelly 2 years earlier at a work event while accompanying my boss, John Sinclair. I was a bit confused because John was married but not to Kelly. Sensing my confusion, John quickly explained that his wife, Lucille, wasn't feeling well, so he had asked Kelly, a family friend, to join him. I had no reason to doubt him, and Kelly struck me as a very charming young woman. As the evening progressed, Kelly seemed to spend more time with me than with John. Eventually, John asked if I could give Kelly a ride home so he could get back to Lucille, and I readily agreed. During the ride, Kelly mentioned that she was divorced with 2 children, Daniel, 18, and Patricia, 16, who were spending the weekend with their father. Before long, we started dating regularly. I did find it odd that we seldom saw her children, and when we did, they weren't particularly friendly towards me. After a whirlwind romance, I proposed to Kelly and was overjoyed when she accepted. However, I was once again puzzled when Daniel and Patricia refused to attend our wedding. Kelly simply said, "They're still upset about the divorce." That struck me as odd since we had been dating for almost a year, and I assumed her divorce had happened well before we met. I decided to set those thoughts aside and focus on enjoying the reception, looking forward to our honeymoon. When I got back from the bar, I started looking for Kelly and found her on the dance floor with John. They were dancing a bit too close for it to seem appropriate for a bride, so I put down the drinks and headed over to join them. They both paused for a brief moment, almost as if I was interrupting, but then quickly pulled apart, and I took my bride into my arms to dance the next few songs with her. When we returned to our table, I casually mentioned to Kelly that she and John were edging a little too close to what might be considered inappropriate for a bride at her own wedding. Kelly laughed it off. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said. "John's just an old family friend. There's nothing for you to worry about." She made it all sound perfectly innocent, but I did notice that Kelly and John seemed to avoid each other for the rest of the night. We eventually left the reception and headed to the honeymoon suite. Kelly's wedding dress was strapless and nearly backless. The bodice was a corset that pushed up her full chest until it looked like it might spill over the dress. I started kissing her. As our emotions intensified, there was an undeniable connection between us. I took her to the edge of the bed, and it happened. Our bond has strengthened. The next morning we went on a honeymoon, but before we knew it, reality took over, and we plunged into a more familiar family routine. Life seemed balanced, and despite the difficulties, the foundation of our relationship remained solid. However, with Daniel and Patricia, Kelly's children, it was different. They tried their best to accept me, and despite my efforts, it seemed almost impossible to establish a relationship with them. Kelly brushed off their behavior, assuring me that things would get better over time, but the tension was obvious. Weeks passed, and one evening, when I came home from work, I found Daniel and Patricia sitting in the living room. Their cold reception hadn't changed, but this time I was determined to deal with the problem directly. "Is your mom at home?" I asked, but all I heard was silence. After a pause, Patricia finally replied, "She's upstairs taking a shower." Disappointment boiled over in me. "Look," I said, "I understand that this situation is not easy for everyone, but if we want to be a family, we need to figure this out. I feel like you both have something against me, and if that's true, we need to talk about it." Patricia was the first to break the silence. "We hate you," she said bluntly, "because you destroyed our family." Shocked, I replied, "What are you talking about? Your mother was already divorced when I met her." "No, it's not like that." Daniel finally spoke up. "She didn't file for divorce until you started dating for several months, and the divorce was finalized just before your wedding." I stood there, stunned, realizing that I was completely unaware of the depth of their pain. The truth about the situation hit me hard, and I was speechless, not knowing how to react. "Kids, I know this is hard, but you have to trust me. Your mother told me she was divorced. I would never get involved with a married woman." "Yeah, right," Daniel replied. "That's not what she said. Who should we believe, our mom or the guy who broke up our family?" They both stood up and left the room, with Patricia rushing out in tears. Well, I thought, this is quite a situation. I walked upstairs to the master bathroom and pulled back the shower curtain. "Ooh," Kelly giggled, "aren't you a bit overdressed to join me?" "This isn't a joke, Kelly," I said, struggling to keep my composure. "The kids just told me you were still married when we started seeing each other." "Of course, darling, I mentioned that, but we were separated." "You didn't say that at all. You told me you were divorced. There's no way I would have dated a married woman, separated or not." "Whatever. We're together now, and that's what matters. Now, why don't you get out of those clothes and come wash my back, and my front?" I was still upset, but let's face it, I'm just a man, and she's attractive. I quickly undressed and joined her, but the events of that day lingered in my mind. I often found myself reflecting on things during quiet moments, but I usually didn't have much time to do so, until one night when I was home alone for the entire evening. Sitting in my den with a glass of wine, two thoughts became clear in my mind. One thing some of my friends often said when talking about guys involved with unfaithful wives was, "If she cheats with you, she'll cheat on you." Although I hadn't noticed any clear signs of Kelly being unfaithful, she certainly had plenty of chances, like tonight's girls' night out. Another thought crossed my mind: how closely she had been dancing with John at our wedding. At the time it seemed fairly innocent, but now I had my doubts. Then I recalled how we first met with her on John's arm at the party because Lucille was sick. It felt like a stretch, but it was all I had to go on at that moment. I planned to be out of the office the next day and called Lucille to see if we could meet for coffee. She was understandably confused, but agreed, and we met at a nearby Starbucks. After exchanging a friendly hug and a quick kiss on the cheek, we got our coffees and sat down. I was at a loss for how to start the conversation, but Lucille took the initiative. "Okay, Selden," she said. "You requested this meeting, so what's on your mind?" I took a deep breath and let out a heavy sigh. "Lucille," I began, "do you remember March 2 years ago when we had that work event you couldn't attend?" "Well," she replied, "that's not entirely accurate. I could have gone, but John told me it was for employees only, no spouses allowed." That hit me hard, like a slap in the face. "What's wrong, Selden?" she asked. "You look like you've just lost your best friend." "You might not be too far off, Lucille. You know my wife, Kelly, right?" "Yes, I was at your wedding. She was a stunning bride." "Yes, she was." "Did I ever share how we met?" Lucille shook her head. "She was at that same party. She was with John. He told me she was there because you were sick. I think we both realize now that he was lying." I didn't share my suspicions about Kelly and John potentially still being involved. I felt terrible for keeping it from her, but I didn't want her to confront him until I had everything sorted out. I obtained a copy of Patagonia and cloned Kelly's phone, which now gave me access to all her calls and texts. It didn't take long to confirm their affair, but the other information I discovered sent chills down my spine. "Hi, John, it's Kelly." "Hey, babe, what's the latest?" John replied. "Everything is arranged on my end. Selden thinks I'm out with the girls, and I have Angela ready to cover for me. Can you escape from the old ball and chain?" "Not an issue," he said. "I told her I'm taking some out-of-town clients for a boring all-business evening." "You mean a little monkey business, right, John?" She laughed. I still can't believe how easily I was able to snag him. "Are you kidding, Kelly?" he asked. "What normal guy could resist you?" If I hadn't already been in disbelief, the next part of their conversation would have pushed me over the edge. "Did you execute the trades I asked you to?" he asked. "Yes, but I still don't understand why you want me to use Selden's computer." There was a pause. I could practically picture him rolling his eyes. "Because once we make our move, we'll need a scapegoat to take the fall." "Selden," she said. "Yes, Selden," he replied. "Oh, he'll likely find a way out of it unless we get really lucky, but by the time they figure everything out, we'll be long gone." "Have you told your kids yet?" "Not yet, but they shouldn't be an issue. They can't stand him for breaking up our family." Once I explain that we're taking his ill-gotten money and living it up on a Caribbean island, I don't think they'll be too upset. Just be cautious. Kids can react oddly when they have to leave their friends and everything else behind. "Don't worry, I can manage them." "Okay, that's up to you. Same time and place as usual." "Yes, talk to you later." "Goodbye, Kelly." I switched off the recording and leaned back with my eyes shut. God, what a total mess. As I had feared the affair, hearing it discussed so openly and coldly, and discovering that our entire relationship was based on lies, deeply shook me. Although we hadn't been together for very long, I loved her wholeheartedly and believed she felt the same way about me. Now there was something more, something illegal they were attempting to implicate me in. I was unsure of my next steps, but I certainly needed more information. If she was part of such a scheme, she must have been hiding the money somewhere. But where? I installed a keystroke logger on both my personal and work computers. I quickly made a breakthrough. John was using early press releases to conduct insider trades, with Kelly executing them from my home computer and occasionally from my work computer. I couldn't understand why they used both machines, perhaps to increase the likelihood of catching me. Whether it was their original plan or not, it was clear they intended to frame me and use it as a diversion while they absconded with their illicit profits. Even more upsetting was overhearing her conversations with Daniel and Patricia. I realized they despised me because Kelly had persuaded them that I was the one who caused her marriage to fall apart. Forget the fact that, even if it were true, she was the one who had cheated on their father, and as I now discovered, she had already been unfaithful to him with John. They became very enthusiastic when she informed them that John had uncovered my insider trading scheme. "That's fantastic," Daniel remarked. "We can hand him over to the authorities and remove him from our lives. Maybe you and Dad can even reconcile." "No, kids," she responded. "I'm afraid that's not possible anymore. Besides, John and I have a better strategy. We're going to steal his earnings and then allow the police to catch him. This does mean we'll need to leave the country for a while, but we'll be residing on a beautiful Caribbean island." "What about school and our friends?" "We'll figure something out, don't worry. We'll have plenty of money. Maybe you can bring your friends on vacation, and once your stepfather is incarcerated, we should be able to return." I couldn't tell if the children truly believed her, but there were no further protests. Additional monitoring revealed that they were transferring the funds to an account in a Belizean bank. Thanks to the keystroke logger, I now had access to that account as well. I wasn't certain what would happen next, but I assumed it was likely I would need an available source of cash. I began making irregular withdrawals from our checking and savings accounts, amounts small enough to avoid suspicion and varying each time. As I gathered enough funds, I hid them in a safe I kept in a storage unit. I bought a new laptop. When I knew they were about to act, I accessed her account and transferred the money to another bank in Barbados. I continued moving it until it ended up in a bank in the Cayman Islands. Immediately after I left for the airport, I realized that Kelly and the kids were heading to Belize. They didn't mention John staying behind, but I assumed it was so he could finalize my setup. That's when the amiable FBI reached out. Picking Kelly and the children up from the airport felt like another dream. Kelly sprinted towards me and embraced my neck, while Daniel and Patricia stood by with the most peculiar expressions on their faces. Since our conversation when she was stranded in Belize, she had never shown any surprise or worry regarding my legal issues. "Oh, Selden, Selden," she exclaimed. "Thank you so much. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was broke, and my credit cards weren't working." "Yes, Kelly," I responded. "I understand all that. But what were you doing in Belize?" "We hadn't discussed any trips. And why didn't you have return tickets? You must have purchased round-trip tickets, right?" "Oh, honey, let's not dwell on that now. I just want to come home and relax." We all got into my car and drove home. "All right, Kelly, I get it," I said. Little did she know just how much I understood. Within 15 minutes of arriving home, she called John. "Oh, John," she sobbed, "it was terrible. I went to the bank just as you instructed, and the money was gone." "What do you mean, gone?" I said exactly that. The account was closed and the funds were transferred to a bank in Barbados. When I contacted the bank there, They refused to provide any information because I lacked the necessary access codes. You didn't do anything, did you, John? No, of course not, he replied. Why would I do such a thing? Oh, I don't know, she responded. Perhaps so you could keep all the money for yourself. Kelly, come on. After everything we've been through and all we mean to each other, you know I could never betray you. I guess not, she said. But you'd better hope I don't discover that you did. She then hung up. Everything was unfolding even better than I had anticipated. I had managed to plant seeds of distrust between them, which could only further my plans. Kelly re-entered the room with an innocent and worried expression that almost convinced me. So, Selden, she began, what's going on with your arrest? Insider trading? I wish I had an answer, Kelly, I replied. I was waiting at the airport for my flight to Nassau when 2 FBI agents approached me and took me into custody. But why? They discovered some preliminary press releases on my computer, and there were trades made based on that information. I have no clue why they were investigating my computer in the first place, let alone how that data ended up there. Did you do it? She pressed. What? Seriously, Kelly, you know me better than that. I'm sorry, she apologized. I just had to ask. So, how did the information get onto your computer? That's where it gets really intriguing, I responded. Most of the computer activity occurred while I was out of town. Kelly seemed momentarily surprised, but quickly regained her composure. So, how do you think they accessed it? Well, I said, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? What do you mean? I'd assume it's obvious. Do you have any idea how they managed to get in? Of course not, Selden, she replied. Where would I even obtain that information, let alone know what to do with it? All right, Kelly, I trust you, I said. I suppose we'll just have to wait until the investigators wrap up their work. Yeah, sure, I thought. I trust you about as far as I can throw you. Her eyes nervously scanned the room and I could smell her sweat as I left, pulling my phone from my pocket. Almost right away, I sensed she was making a call, and unsurprisingly, it was to John Sinclair. John, she said the moment he answered. He knows, Selden knows. I don't know how he knows, but he does. Calm down, Kelly, he responded. There's no way he knows anything. If he did, he would have already alerted the authorities. I suppose you're right, she conceded, but something strange is happening. And where did the money go? If neither you nor I took it, then who did? I wish I knew, Kelly. I truly wish I knew. My subsequent meeting with Ms. Atkins was quite intriguing. She had consulted with the prosecutors, and although they concurred that the evidence seemed to exonerate me, they still had reservations about my possible involvement. This hesitation wasn't entirely unreasonable, given that the transactions were conducted on my computer. The situation was further complicated by my increasing attraction to Ms. Atkins. I had found her stunning from the first moment we met, but as I collaborated more closely with her on my case, her undeniable sensuality overwhelmed me, and she possessed a personality and intellect that matched perfectly. She tactfully dismissed all my attempts to take our relationship beyond a professional level, and when I became a bit too forward, she reminded me that I was her client and that it was unethical for her to engage in a personal relationship with me. I tried to argue that it would only complicate her work on my behalf, but she simply laughed charmingly and shook her head. I wasn't sure how I would manage it, but I was determined to win her over. Kelly was summoned for questioning, and I caught wind through the grapevine that she was still attempting to shift the blame onto me. Afterward, she would approach me in tears. Selden, please, you have to believe that I'm not guilty. I would never try to incriminate you. I care about you. I struggled to keep from laughing at her. I understand, Kelly, I really do. Don't stress, everything will be fine. Could someone else have accessed my computer? Has anyone else been in the house? I couldn't be sure if John had betrayed her in our home, but I couldn't see why he wouldn't. No, Selden, she replied. Of course not. I felt so wicked, yet it felt justified. She definitely deserved whatever was coming her way. Maybe it's the kids. They've always resented me, holding me responsible for the end of your marriage. Kelly was so taken aback that she took a few moments to answer. That's absurd, Selden, she responded. Even if they dislike you as much as you claim, how could they have obtained that information? Well, if it wasn't them, and no one else has been here, then it must have been... Kelly covered her mouth with her hand and fled the room. The police repeatedly summoned Kelly for additional questioning, but they lacked any evidence beyond the transactions occurring on my computer and had no proof that she was responsible for them. Once the investigators realized that all the press releases had passed through John's hands, he was also brought in for interrogation, but he refused to cooperate. An anonymous tip revealed his connection with Kelly, and a search of phone records confirmed their relationship. Kelly's one-way trip to Belize and the associated bank records ultimately sealed their fate. It didn't take long for the authorities to persuade Kelly to testify against John. Their trials were largely procedural, as the evidence was conclusive, especially with Kelly admitting her involvement in the scheme. Kelly pleaded desperately with me. Please, Selden, she begged. You have to believe me. I never wanted to do it. John was forcing me. Enough, Kelly, I responded. I know everything. I'm aware that you were having an affair with John while still married to your first husband, and that you and John were involved when you enticed me. Whether you intended to use me as a pawn in your plan is irrelevant. It's over, Kelly, and it seems Daniel and Patricia will achieve their goal of being with their father, just not with you. I doubt he'll face any issues obtaining custody since their mother is a convicted felon, right? Kelly immediately broke down in tears as the bailiff came to take her away. Since neither she nor John were willing or able to repay the money, they were ineligible for reduced sentences. She was sentenced to 5 years, and John received 10 years. Before leaving with their father, the children still refused to talk to me. They continued to hold me responsible for their parents' separation, and I believe they also blamed me for Kelly's arrest. Tyler managed to have my arrest record cleared and restored my trader's license, although I had no intention of returning to my previous company. To celebrate our success, Tyler invited me out for drinks, and I gladly accepted. Once our drinks arrived, I got straight to the point. So, I began, does this mean we're done? Is the case closed? Yes, she replied. You're free now. Great, I responded. You're dismissed. She nearly spilled her drink on the table. What? Why? Because you mentioned having ethical guidelines against dating clients. Yes, I do, but I don't understand how... A spark seemed to ignite in her eyes. I must be the most oblivious woman ever, she admitted. Especially as a lawyer, I just didn't realize. Now that you're aware, what do you think? Do we have a chance? There's always a possibility, she answered. It's just that I genuinely hadn't considered you in that way. You hurt me, madame, I said, theatrically holding my heart. Oh, no, she quickly clarified. I didn't mean it like that. You're very attractive, and under different circumstances, I would have definitely thought about dating you. I sense there's a but, I remarked. Yes, a but, she acknowledged. We didn't meet under different circumstances. We met as lawyer and client, with you facing serious charges. But I was innocent, I countered. I'm not trying to be overly precise with the legal details, she explained. The police concluded they didn't have enough evidence to pursue the charges against you. Additionally, they found more evidence implicating John and Kelly. However, that doesn't exactly prove your innocence. To borrow a phrase from Dickens, the law is an ass, I responded. Tyler let out her charming laugh. That's a sentiment I've heard before. I'm not denying its validity, but it is what it is. You still haven't really answered my question. Will you go out with me? You are quite persistent, she replied. All right, I'll go out with you. But I want to be clear from the start that things won't progress much until we have some serious conversations. My intuition tells me you're not fully disclosing everything, and I'll find out the truth one way or another. I became alert at her words. What did she know or think she knew? You're welcome to try, I said. I'm sure you can be very convincing. She simply gave me a knowing smile and a wink as we arranged to have dinner that Friday. Then we parted with a warm handshake and cheek kisses. Friday night arrived, and we enjoyed a pleasant dinner and conversation, though there was an underlying tension throughout the evening. Tyler suspected something about me, and I was concerned about her suspicions. I received a much warmer goodnight kiss, but that was all. We went on a second and third date, and our goodnight kisses became increasingly passionate, yet a barrier still remained between us. I was conflicted. I was certain I loved Tyler and believed she felt the same about me. However, she couldn't fully commit to our relationship while I was concealing a part of myself. I feared that if I truly opened up, I might lose her. We kept meeting regularly, but there was always an unspoken issue overshadowing our conversations. At times, it felt like I was being interrogated. This tension was straining our relationship. Tyler was hesitant to take things further because she doubted me and believed that trust was essential in any partnership. Given my past with Kelly, I understood her worries, but I couldn't muster the courage to completely open up to her. The situation reached a breaking point when we were passionately kissing on her sofa. Just as things were heating up, she paused everything once again. However, this time it was going to be different. "Selden," she said, "I can't keep doing this." What, are you breaking up with me?" I don't want to, Selden. I'm really falling for you, but I can't be with someone I can't trust." "Why? What did I do to make you doubt me?" "Come on, Selden," she replied. "You can't be so naive. You clearly know more about your situation than you've shared. That anonymous phone call was too convenient, and the missing money doesn't add up." I was caught in a dilemma. If I didn't be honest, our relationship was likely over, but if I revealed everything, we might still break up, and I had no idea what legal consequences I could face. Taking a deep breath, I chose to tell her the truth and accept whatever outcome followed. One thing was certain: I didn't want to lose her, and this was my only chance. "All right, Tyler, I'm going to tell you everything. I hope and pray you'll still want to be with me." Tyler seemed somewhat astonished, likely curious about what I was about to disclose, before she gave me a nod to continue. I explained how we first met, the children's reactions to my marriage with Kelly, and finally detailed my conversation with Lucille that uncovered the lies told by John and Kelly. Then, I shared how I had cloned the phone, which not only confirmed the affair, but also revealed their insider trading activities. I didn't even need to mention the money transfers and the phone call, as it was already clear to her. I leaned forward, my face buried in my hands, completely drained, wondering if these would be my final moments there. When I looked up, Tyler was silent, seemingly deep in thought. "I can't say I wasn't somewhat suspicious," she responded, "but hearing it directly from you is still quite shocking." I nodded in understanding. "I understand," I replied, "but what does this mean for us?" "I'm not sure right now. I need some time to process all of this. I think you should leave for the time being, and I'll reach out when I'm ready." I paused for a moment, but realized that respecting her wishes was my best option. I stood up, kissed the top of her head, and walked out. The ensuing days were the most challenging of my life. I found myself both yearning for and fearing her call. Additionally, I was anxious about the possibility of the police arriving at my door. On the next Friday, my phone rang, displaying Tyler's name on the caller ID. I answered it with considerable apprehension. "Hello, Tyler," I greeted nervously. "Hi, Selden. I've made some decisions. Could you please come over for dinner around 7, and then we'll talk?" "Absolutely, Tyler. Whatever you need." After exchanging goodbyes, I hung up, feeling somewhat relieved that she wanted to have a conversation rather than simply dismiss me. I rang her doorbell, and she reached up to give me a gentle kiss on the lips before I followed her into the kitchen. I wasn't sure how hungry I would be or if I could keep anything down, but I grabbed a Pepsi from the fridge and sat at the table until she kindly moved me away from the stove. We enjoyed a pleasant dinner, engaging in light conversation. Thankfully, the meal was very light. I don't think I could have handled a heavy one. After we finished eating, she let me help with the cleanup. Then we moved to her living room and sat at opposite ends of her couch. We sat together in silence for a few minutes. I was hesitant to press her, and it was clear she needed time to collect her thoughts. "Selden," she began, "I have to admit I'm disappointed you didn't share all of this when I first took your case. As your attorney, you could and should have trusted me. It also hurts that you kept it from me even after we became romantically involved. However, I understand your feelings of betrayal, which made it hard for you to open up even to me. I also appreciate that you eventually came forward, even if I had to encourage you a bit." She flashed me a knowing smile. In the end, my decision was actually quite simple. I love you, Selden, and I know you love me. I do have one condition before we continue our relationship. I hope I'm not overstepping, but I'd do anything for you, Tyler. I expected you to say that. Don't worry, I don't think it will be an issue for you. So, what is it, Tyler? The suspense is unbearable. It's the money, Selden. I'm uncomfortable keeping it. What can we do? There's no way to determine who the money belongs to. Actually, that's been what I've been thinking about, and I believe I have a solution. What is it, Tyler? I asked. The money isn't being used for anything good where it is. That was an interesting way to phrase it, Selden, because I was thinking of using it for something beneficial. Do you have something specific in mind? I'm open to whatever you want to do. As you know, both of my parents died from cancer. I'd like to donate it to cancer research. That's a wonderful idea, Tyler. I'll start making the arrangements first thing tomorrow. Tyler came over and sat on my lap and kissed me. For the first time, I sincerely hoped that everything would be fine between us. So what's our next step, Tyler? I asked. I think you should take me to bed, she replied with a playful smile. I was caught off guard. Up to this point, the most we were capable of was a few tender moments. Don't be so serious, she laughed when she saw my reaction. I just want to fall asleep in your arms. Of course, I muttered when she scoffed at my indecision. We went upstairs, and Tyler let me use the bathroom first. She gave me a spare toothbrush, and after cleaning myself up, I slipped into bed with my hands behind my head, still amazed at how much my life had changed. Tyler showed up a little later in a simple nightgown and slipped into bed next to me. She put her head on my chest, and I hugged her, pulling her to me. I love you so much, Tyler, I said softly. I still can't believe you love me. You better believe it, she whispered, putting her hand on my stomach. I wouldn't have gone through all this if I didn't believe. The lights went out, and soon we both fell asleep, and her comfortable presence calmed my worries. The next morning, I woke up to Tyler stirring next to me. There was something peaceful about the way she woke up. Her presence next to me seemed completely natural. She smiled warmly, and I realized that for the first time in a long time, I felt really satisfied. Our bond strengthened, and over the next few days we felt like we were getting into a light rhythm, sharing moments of tenderness and affection. It wasn't about rushing things. It was about really appreciating each other. We took our time, getting closer both emotionally and physically. Every touch, every kiss was filled with meaning, and soon the boundaries that once seemed so insurmountable dissolved as we learned to trust each other even more. By the end of the day, I realized that no matter what happened, Tyler and I were on our way to something special, something worth waiting for and feeling insecure about. The following day, I started transferring the funds back from the Cayman Islands and made anonymous contributions to various cancer research and treatment organizations. Each donation was substantial enough to be meaningful and beneficial, yet not so large as to draw unwanted attention. There was still one final piece needed to complete the puzzle that had dominated my life for the past few years. Tyler and I were sitting in our living room enjoying our post-dinner drinks when there was a tentative knock on the front door. I rose to answer it and was stunned to see Daniel and Patricia standing there, looking quite uneasy. "Can we come in?" Daniel asked. "Of course," I responded, puzzled. I gestured for them to enter and closed the door behind them. They walked into the living room and Tyler stood up. "Tyler, these were my stepchildren, Daniel and Patricia." Startled, Tyler shook their hands. "Please have a seat. Would you like something to drink?" she offered. Daniel glanced at Patricia, who shook her head. "No, thank you," he replied. "I don't think we'll be here long." "All right," I said. "What brings you here?" "We're here to apologize," Daniel stated. "I certainly wasn't anticipating that." "Apologize? Apologize for what?" I inquired. "For how we treated you," he explained. My confusion must have been obvious as Patricia continued. "We visited our mother yesterday," she said. "I'm sure that must have been tough for you, but how does that relate to me?" "She revealed the truth about your relationship," Daniel said, "that she had informed you she was divorced." "There's more," Patricia added. "She also confessed that she had been cheating on our father with that jerk, John Sinclair." "Well," I responded, "I truly appreciate you coming by like this. I'm sure this whole situation has been very difficult for you." They both nodded in agreement. "Could you share something with me?" I inquired. They looked up and nodded. "I understand how you feel about me, especially based on what you were told. However, even if those accounts were accurate, your mother wasn't entirely without fault. You were old enough to make a choice. Why did you stay with her instead of your father?" Daniel simply gave me a sorrowful smile. "It was mostly more of her fabrications," he explained. "She tried to blame the affair on him. He worked too many hours, traveled too much, neglected her, the usual excuses. She conveniently left out that she was a stay-at-home mom with expensive tastes, and he had to work hard to support her lifestyle." I could only shake my head as they stood up to leave. I shook Daniel's hand and gave Patricia a brief hug. "I want to express again how much I appreciate you telling me all of this. It shows real character. If there's ever anything I can do—" "Thank you, but it's really not necessary," Daniel replied. "Our father has everything under control. We're putting a lot of effort into rebuilding our relationship, and it's going well. I think we'll be okay." I walked them to the door and then sat down next to Tyler again. "Ugh," I said. "That was definitely unexpected." "Yes," Tyler replied. "They seem like cute kids." "Yes, it's kind of a bad news, good news situation," I said. "How so?" "The bad news is that our marriage is really broken, and I have 2 wonderful children. And the good news is—" "The good news is that it brought me to you," I declared, pulling her to me and kissing her. Before it went any further, Tyler stood up and helped me to my feet. "I think it would be more convenient somewhere else," she suggested, leading me into the bedroom. I'm not one to act stupid, and I quickly followed her. I think it's not that hard after all.